Hello, everyone. My name is Abdallah Shaban, and I'm a senior product manager on the Amplify team. And today, I'm going to be walking you through our new capabilities that have been unlocked to allow front-end developers to visually build full-stack applications utilizing a multitude of our tooling, including Amplify Studio, our CLI, in addition to our UI client libraries. Just a quick overview of what our agenda is going to be for today's talk. At the beginning, I'm going to be giving everybody a little bit of an overview about what Amplify really is. And then I'm going to start talking through some of the features that we're unlocking with Studio. And then at the end, I'm also going to be showing you all a demo, demonstrating all of the different features that we've now enabled. So let's start with what is Amplify. So Amplify is really a framework that makes it easy for front-end developers to go from idea to production-ready applications fast. And you can do that without actually having deep cloud expertise. So to unpack that a little bit further, let's talk about who front-end developers are. So in the context of this presentation, front-end developers are developers that are actually building the front-facing functionality or the look and feel of your application. So it's basically the window into your brand, into your application. And this window is basically how your end users are actually going to be interacting with your product. So we estimate that there are about 14 million web developers and 10 million web developers out there in the world right now. And this, we believe that Amplify has an excellent solution that actually addresses a lot of the friction points that front-end developers feel when they're building full-stack applications. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of front-end. So in 1989, the web really started with Tim Berners-Lee creating the HTML and HTTP protocols. And from there, we moved a little bit further in 1995 towards the creation of JavaScript and CSS. So now we have a little bit more of client logic that we could use to manipulate your web page, or actually to handle a little bit of client logic. And then in 2002, Ajax came in. And now you have the ability to asynchronously be able to interact with your front-end page and be able to send information back and forth between your front-end client and also your server. And in 2006, we have the introduction of Amazon EC2. So cloud computing is now alive. And we also now have jQuery that allows you to also be able to manipulate the DOM. So now you can manipulate the DOM. Now you can use Ajax in order for you to be able to send requests back and forth asynchronously. And then 2007 came in, and the iPhone was born. And that's really where the explosion of the creation of apps began. In 2009, Node.js was introduced, which meant for JavaScript developers specifically is now I can actually use JavaScript for me to be able to build my app front and back using JavaScript. And then in 2013, frameworks came into play. And now I actually have an easy way for me to be able to create components and be able to link those back to my, basically the backend, in order for me to be able to quickly create and iterate on my application. And then serverless came in to streamline that even further, allowing front-end developers to have a more streamlined experience for building full-stack applications. So let's talk a little bit about the types of apps that existed in the 90s. They were static. There really was barely any interactions that customers or end users can actually have with these websites. It really was just static content with hyperlinks that direct you to different sections of the website, or maybe redirect you out to another website. Then in the 2000s, Web 2.0 was born. And now we live in the 2000s in a world where we have interactivity. So users now can actually create content, can share content, and that's basically where, at the early 2000s, that was the explosion and really the shift of where web technologies have evolved. And then, as I mentioned, in 2007, the iPhone was born. And when the iPhone was born, now end user expectation changes. Now you have apps. Apps were born, and through apps, you have a native experience that is extremely performant and also utilizes device context, which means it utilizes device features. It uses a GPS that's on your phone, it uses Bluetooth, and uses other native or mobile-specific sensors that are available on the device. And in 2010 to this day, because of that change, now we also have web apps that have been introduced. And with the different JavaScript frameworks that are available now that allow you to be able to build front-end apps that are performant and feature-rich, we now have had also an explosion of these types of apps. And examples of those are Airbnb, Spotify, where you can have a fully functioning application that can work in your browser. So let's talk a little bit about what led to this improvement. How did we get to a place where we now have actually working and functioning applications in our browser? The first one is, of course, like the introduction of frameworks like React. So because these frameworks are now available, then you actually have the ability to handle logic in terms of interacting with the client or making changes to your web page directly in the client without having to do round trips to the server for every single request. Then the second piece is browsers became significantly more powerful. So you have things like IndexedDB, you have caches that are available, which means when you're building your application, optimizing for performance becomes less of a concern that you have because the browsers have just become significantly more powerful. And then the third piece has been cloud computing. Now, rather than having to worry about setting up servers and having to worry about how do I store this data, all of that, cloud provided you with a lot more tools for you to be able to quickly start and then to also be able to scale. And then the last piece here is end user expectation changed as well. Because we now have mobile apps that are available, that are performant, that are fast, that are able to give you feature-rich experiences, there has to be some sort of shift on the web as well to be able to match that expectation as well. So how have these changes impacted the responsibilities of a front-end developer? So this image shows all of the different components that you need in a full stack application to get it to be functioning. And it varies basically from all the way of the backend pieces, like database, servers, what server-side language you're going to use, and then all the way up to the front end, meaning your HTML, your CSS, and all of the pieces that you're using to build your client. And then right in the middle, you have your API. How am I interacting with my backend through my front-end client? So some innovations now started coming in to really address some of the pain points that existed with previously building full-stack applications. It was extremely difficult to build servers in a way, if you're trying to get started quickly, if you want to be able to scale easily. So now we have serverless that's been introduced. So now the headache of having to do that is not as much of a problem when you're trying to get started. Then when it comes to server-side languages, you now are using the same conventions like JavaScript, the same conventions of JavaScript to build both your front end and your back end. And for your API, you now have things like GraphQL, which allow front-end developers to be able to interact with the back end using a contract where they can easily define the pieces of information that they need to retrieve back from their front end. From their back end to their front end. So what ended up happening with these innovations is that unlocked a lot of speed and a lot of velocity. So then that meant that front-end developers, because of all of these unlocks, have gotten to a place where now they have increasingly more responsibility for building full-stack functionality. And that's really where we feel Amplify comes in. So we built Amplify to make it easy for front-end developers to build full-stack applications. And the way that Amplify accomplishes that is through three main components. The first one is build. And through build, as a developer, as a front-end developer, you're able to use our tooling like the CLI or Amplify Studio in order for you to set up your backend. And then you can use our front-end client libraries to connect to that backend. Then after you've built your application, you can also use our CI/CD capabilities, our hosting capabilities, to be able to ship your app, both front-end and back-end, using our tooling. And then the last piece, which is for when your app starts growing and starts scaling, your use cases start becoming larger, you need to be able to scale. You need to have the flexibility to be able to make changes to your default configurations to your app. And that's where being able to extend your app with CDK comes into play. So as a part of the tooling that we provide Amplify developers, or front-end developers, we have Amplify Studio, which you can then use to model your data that you're going to be using in your app. And you can do that either visually through Amplify Studio, or you can also build GraphQL schemas that you can then push up to your Amplify project. You can also set up authentication and authorization, and that is also something that you can do either visually or through the CLI. You can set up file storage. So that means using S3, creating your bucket, and then defining rules of authorization on that. And the last piece is we also provide you a simple content management system that provides you with the ability to be able to manage your data, manage files that you have in storage, and also be able to manage your users and groups that are in your app. So this is a list of all of the platforms, or the frameworks, I should say, that we currently support. And we really try to strike a balance between the web, so the most common frameworks such as React, Angular, and Vue. We also support native mobile front-end developers, so whether that is iOS or Android. And we also support hybrid front-end developers, which means developers that are building cross-platform using frameworks such as React Native and Flutter. So this is a bit of a breakdown about hosting and the different features that we have available. So hosting, Amplify Hosting, is a fully managed hosting service for modern web apps. And as I mentioned, you can actually use Amplify Hosting in order for you to be able to deploy your app from the front end and the back end. And you can also use continuous deployment. So you're able to connect your repository to our CI/CD pipeline, and then as you're pushing new features out, then that automatically updates your production application. We also provide you with the ability to be able to do easy custom domain setup. So if you have your own domain and you want to set that up, we provide you with the ability to do that. And the last one is probably one of my favorite features, is PR reviews. You're able to basically, we spin up an environment for you where you're able to see the results of the PR and then determine if the functionality looks right to you before you then determine to actually merge the code that you have into your production environment, development environment, whatever this destination environment that you're creating that PR against. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about our extensibility features with Amplify. So when you configure and set up Amplify, you're actually able to, you are actually provided with default configurations for all of the different features that you add, whether that is authentication, API, storage. But when your app use cases starts growing, you need to basically brick away or add additional features to your application. And the first piece is Amplify Override, which means if I have authentication resources, if I have API resources or storage resource or authentication or storage resources that I want to override, change some settings or tweak some settings, you're able to use Amplify Override off, and then from there, you basically get a CDK. You're able to use CDK in order for you to make changes to your authentication features. You can also do things like Amplify Add Custom, where you're able to add resources that might not be supported from Amplify or provided from the Amplify framework out of the box. An example of that could be creating an SQS queue, for example. That's something that you can do now as well with Amplify. And the last piece, which is a more advanced use case, is being able to export your app into a CDK construct that you can then use as part of a CI/CD pipeline that uses CDK. And this is really helpful for environments where you have, for example, some compliance that you need to basically follow in terms of DevOps. So Amplify in production is currently supporting hundreds of thousands of developers. And it allows them to really ship apps faster. Busby is an example of a customer that we have that's actually using Amplify. They've significantly been able to speed up their process of speed to market, and they've also been able to significantly reduce their cost as well. We also have large customers such as Amazon Music that's also using Amplify to build the different features and services that they're providing customers. So up to now, I would say up to before the end of last year, our focus was really primarily on the backend piece and allowing front-end developers to connect to the backend. But then what we started seeing is that a lot of developers were telling us that there's a lot of pain when it comes to creating the necessary UI for the app, and there's a lot of pain in terms of how do we maintain that. So let's talk a little bit through a very typical example of the product development workflow. So this basically starts with a product manager and a UX designer having a conversation about a new feature or maybe a new product that they want to enable. And as a part of that, a design gets created by the UX designer. And after that design is created, what ends up happening is that the design is basically handed over to the front-end developer so that the front-end developer can then begin the process of actually building those designs. So then what the front-end developer does is they take these designs, they rationalize the designs into components, they lay out the components in the way that the design was actually given to them, and they start binding that UI to data, and they also determine places in their code where they have to build custom logic for their application in order for it to behave in the way that they're expecting it to. What ends up happening, however, in a lot of cases is the designs don't quite end up being pixel perfect. And that causes a lot of frustration on both ends, whether that is on the front-end developer side or whether that is on the UI UX designer side and the product management side, because this is not what we signed up for, this is not what the end result has been, and there's always a ton of communication back and forth in order to correct mistakes in the design, make sure that it actually complies with branding guidelines. And we thought a lot about this problem. And we thought, like, how do we solve this? And a couple of initial solutions came to mind. The first solution was, let's build a solution that allows designers to take control end to end. And then the other one was, can we build a solution that allows developers to take charge end to end? But then the more that we talked about this, that's not really a feasible solution. Those two different jobs exist because they actually require different skill sets. So there was an obvious need there. There's a need to help facilitate the designer-developer handoff, ensuring that designs that are actually being developed by the front-end developers match the expectation of the UX designers and the product managers, and reducing friction along that journey. So today, we're launching capabilities that will help front-end teams accelerate UI development, in addition to allowing them to also streamline setting up the app backend, which is where Amplify Studio comes into play. We're currently in public preview. And Amplify Studio allows you to visually build complete, feature-rich apps in hours instead of weeks, with full control over the application code. So it's not a magic box. It's not hidden from you. At the end of the day, what you're getting is code that you can use and customize for your use cases. So now with the introduction of Studio, we believe that we've really been able to cover and provide solutions for all of the full stack apps components. Rather than just focusing on the backend and connecting to that backend, we now provide front-end developers with the ability to actually be able to create designs or basically be able to convert designs into working code that they could use at the front end. And now I'm going to walk you through a demo of how that experience looks like. I'm going to be creating an app and walking you through what a typical workflow is going to look like between a UX designer and a front-end developer. All right. So the first thing that you would do when you're creating a new Amplify app is there's multiple ways of doing it. I'm going to do it the lazy way. So I'm going to go to the AWS console, and then to AWS Amplify. And of course, I'm logged out. And once I'm in the Amplify console, I can use new app, build an app, and from here, I can decide on what the name of this app is. So what's going to happen now is that my app is actually getting created with Amplify, which means is that all of my resources are now being created in the cloud in my AWS account in order for me to be able to now start utilizing different features like authentication, like storage. But for this demo specifically, I'm going to focus on using the UI builder. So I already have another application that I've created just to make this demo a little bit simpler. So one of the first things that I do when I'm building a new application is really thinking about what does my data model look like? Because my data model is going to inform how do I connect this data then eventually to my front-end application. So since, as I mentioned, we actually provide you with the ability to be able to set up your model and be able to set up the data associated with it here, you can go to the data section of Amplify Studio, and you can see here that I have a home model that I've created. The application that I'm going to be creating today is going to be a very, very simple Airbnb clone where you're able to see different apartments in different sides of the world and basically showing you the data that comes back out of this model that's linked to these properties. And you can see here that I have a name, I have a description, I have a price, and I also have an image source. So then, what you would need to do is you would go to the UI library section of Amplify Studio, and then you would click on Sync with Figma. And the way that really our Amplify Studio and UI Builder is built is that we have an integration that's created between, that we've created between Figma and Amplify Studio. So the first step is you can then click on Use our Figma template, and it will take you to a template that we've created that you can clone or duplicate into your Figma account. And once it's there, you get to change the name. Then what you would need to do is click on, well, before I get into that, what's really important for you to know is that the way that this project works is all of the components that you're eventually going to end up using are built out of primitives. So if you go to the primitive section in the Figma template that we provide, you'll be able to see all of the different primitives that you could use in order for you to be able to construct your component. Then, if you go to the My Components section, you'll be able to see all of the components that are available for your app. And these components are actually going to be the ones that are available for you in Amplify once you allow that sync to happen. In my case, I already have a Figma project that I've been using. And I've made some changes to my Figma file. Some of those changes include I've removed a lot of the components in here that I no longer needed. As you can see from the other Figma file that was just created from the template, there's a lot more components here, and I didn't really need those components, so I just ended up deleting them. And then what I did as well is I've customized this home card component. And inside of this home card component, I've actually added a little bit of a cornered angle here to the image. And that's something that you can basically decide to remove if you don't want to. In this case, I'm going to remove it. And then Figma saves automatically. So then what you would have to do is copy the link to your Figma project. Then you would go to the UI library. You would click on Sync with Figma. You would paste your link, and you would click on Continue. What you would get is a prompt to authorize access. And once you do that, then our integration kicks in. And all of the components that you have in the My Components section in your app, all of those are going to now start getting basically created within the UI builder. And you can see here that because I've made a change to my home card, it's actually, like Studio is actually prompting me that there is a change that has happened to this component. And you can then decide, do I want to accept these changes or do I want to reject them? Because we don't want our front-end developers to get to a place where some changes happen to the Figma project that was not, for example, verified, for that to just come through once the sync happens. We've added this guardrail. So I'm going to say that I'm actually going to accept this change, and I'm going to save the component. And now, if I go to my home card, you'll see that my home card is now available, and you can see that it doesn't actually have any corners. So it looks like a complete square based on my frame that I've selected when I built that component. So then, with this, I've actually now created my components from Figma to Amplify. Those components are now available to me. And right now, I want to also show you how you can actually pull some of these components into your app. And at this point in time, we only support React. So I'm going to be building a very simple React app and show you how you're able to pull these components into your code. So this component is a navbar. So almost every app is going to need a navbar. So I'm going to start with that first. So the easiest way, in my opinion, to get started is you click on the Git component code at the bottom here, and you do your initial project setup, if this is the first time that you're actually using this. And it guides you with the first two things are basically downloading the CLI tool, Amplify CLI, which is going to allow you to pull all of the resources that you have already now configured in your Amplify project. And then the second piece is going to be installing Amplify client libraries and also the UI libraries that we have that contain the primitives that are eventually used to build the components that you're going to be pulling in. Then what you do is you go to your index.js file and you add basically these import statements. So I'm going to start with that now. I've already installed my CLI. It's already configured. I've already installed the AWS Amplify library and the UI library through my terminal. And what I've done here is I've created a really simple React application. And I've just used the npx create React app just to be able to scaffold and quickly start with my application. So now what I can do is I can go to my index.js file. I'm going to add the imports that are shown here. And with that, the basic setup just to get my application ready is there now in terms of like being able to use these UI components. Then, if I want to use a specific UI component, what I can do is I can copy this command, which allows me then to pull my environment that's available from Amplify to my local development machine. So as this runs, what's going to happen is that all of my configurations that have set up my my cloud resources are going to be pulled in. My UI components are also going to be pulled in order for me to start using those within my app. The second piece is going to be setting up the app.js file to be able to start actually using these components in my app. So if I go here, I add the navbar. And now my navbar has now been basically added to my app. And it seems that I've already also have finished pulling my resources from the cloud. So what I can do now is start my application and hope that everything works. And it did. As you can see, this is actually the UI component that was available in my project. So let me show you real quick. Here it is. So this is the same exact navbar that I've been able to create using Figma. Now it's available for me to be able to use within my app. If you notice here in my browser, this actually, it doesn't seem like it's responsive. So what's really cool about the UI components is that you're also able to add basically modifiers to your design. So I can do things like width is equal to 100px or 100 pw. I think I'm doing this wrong. And once this is saved, as you can see, this component is now responsive. And I was able to get this experience up and going with less than 10 lines of code. Can we switch back? I'm sorry, can we switch back the deck? Thank you. So the next piece, so this was great for static content. If I have a component where I have static data that I'm showing within my app, really simple and easy for me to be able to pull that static content and show it in my application. But what happens when I want to connect my components to my model? I want to be able to now actually create the cards that I've shown you, the home cards, and be able to connect those to the data model that I have. Can we switch back to the demo, please? I'm sorry, keep doing this to you. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the home card that I've made some adjustments to. And I am going to, when I click on this component, I want to basically now bind this component to my data model. And the way to do that is by clicking on the components that you want to actually have linked to your model. And from here, you can click on Set Text Label, and you can see that my model is actually now showing in the dropdown. So for me, I'm going to have the name of the property be linked here. The description, I'm going to use the prop as label. So this is using just props from React. And I'm going to use the description from the home model. And for the price, I actually have the prices shown as just floats in my data model. What's really cool with Studio is that you can do things like this, where you can actually concatenate different values here. So I can do a $, and then the price, and then maybe I want to add day. So now, as you can see here, I have this price per day, and I've basically been able to concatenate that directly through Amplify Studio. So we don't actually have support for localization at this point in time, but that's definitely one of the things that we're looking into. Awesome. So the last thing that I want to do is I want to change my image source, and I want to add here image source. So now you can see here that we have Cuenca Haven. That's basically the name of the property. You have a description for that property, and then you also have the price per day. To take that even further, I don't want to just show one single item. I actually want to show a collection of all of the properties that I have in my data model. And Amplify Studio really makes that easy for you. So you can click on Create Collections. You can call it whatever makes the most sense to you. And after you create the collection, Amplify automatically then shows you a preview of how that looks like. You can then change the design. For example, I think a grid is going to make a lot more sense here. I don't really like that all of these components are so close to each other, so I'm going to add a little bit of padding. Okay. Cool. So now that's done, and all of this saves automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. And then the last piece that I want to do here is I actually want to now pull the changes that I've made because this component does not exist now locally on my machine because I've pulled my environment prior to creating this collection. So I would go back to my CLI or my terminal, and I would use the CLI command of amplify pull, which is going to pull my environment again. I haven't really made changes to the backend environment. However, my UI components, there are new UI components that I can now benefit from. And you'll see here that basically the CLI will also tell you that you have no changes on your backend environment. You just have new UI components that are being generated and are being saved locally to your computer now. Now, what I can do is go back to my app.js file, and I can do home collection. And now it just works. Now, as you can see here, like it took me one line of code for me to be able to actually have this collection up and going. And what's even cooler about this collection is that this collection uses a component of Amplify behind the scene called Datastore, which basically keeps this data synced between the front-end client and between your backend. So let me show you an example. So if I go to Bahamas Villa, for example, and if I go to content, in order for me to be able to show you what the data looks like in our content management system, so within the CMS, you can see here that I have, these are all of the different properties that are now being shown in my app here. You can see here that we have 6, 7 properties, and we have 7 items that are here in my content management system. So I can make a change here to Bahamas Villa. Let's say beautiful kitchen, because that's very important to people when they're booking Airbnbs. And once that's saved, you can see here that the data was reflected immediately. You did not need to refresh that page, and the customers or your end users are seeing that experience live. All right, can we switch it back again? Awesome. So the next piece that I want to show you is UI event handlers. So we don't just allow you to be able to link your components to your data model. We also provide you with functionality to be able to interact with your component and be able to set that up through Amplify. Whether that is, you can actually do it through Amplify Studio, or you can override these basically UI handlers, such as things like onClick and things like that. And being able to do that either programmatically through your code, and you can override that, or you can use Amplify Studio. And I'll walk you through an example of what that looks like through Amplify Studio. Thank you. So if I go to my home card, which is basically the experience that I'm going to try to create here, is I want, once somebody clicks on this component, to take them to a different URL. And that URL could be, for example, more details about the property. It could potentially be a page where you can actually reserve it with a calendar view. I haven't gotten that far in building those yet, but I want to at least show you the functionality of how you would go about building something like that. So what you can do is you click on the component. You can, from here, you can see that we give you a prompt for setting an on-click action. And once you set up that on-click action, you can then basically decide, OK, under navigate, what do I want to do here? In my case, I want to be able to go to a specific URL. Because this is the same app, I don't want to open up a new tab. So I'm not going to use the first option. I'm going to use the second one. And then let's assume, for example, that the route that I have set up in my React app is actually my domain, and then slash the ID of my I'm losing my words, of my home. Or the home of the component that I've clicked on. So you can actually concatenate that and add that to the URL. So I can start here with saying example.com. Let's just say I don't really have one set up right now. And then here I can add the ID. And let me just make sure, HTTP. All right, so that seems good. And this also saves automatically. I've made a change to my component, so now, because I've made a change to my component, I need to pull back the changes to my local machine. So I go back to my terminal, I pull my changes. The CLI is now telling me, Okay, cool. You don't have any changes on your backend environment. However, we're generating new UI components for you or changes to your UI components. And now, since those are available, ideally, my app should have gotten refreshed. I'm just going to remove this logo. All right. So now, if I click, well, here we go. You can see here that I've been redirected to a new URL. You can see here that the ID from that specific component or instance of that component that is linked to my data model, now that ID is available as a part of the URL. And this is one of the easiest ways in which you can actually set up redirects within your app and using the native functionality that we provide you with Amplify Studio. Can we switch back? All right. The last piece that I want to demo today is shipping with Amplify Hosting. I've built my app. My app looks great. Now I want to be able to deploy this application quickly and easily. And I want to do that in the most streamlined way possible. Today, there are multiple ways that you could do that. You can set up a CI/CD pipeline that connects your GitHub app or your GitHub repository to your Amplify app. I'm going to do it even the more simpler way. So if you don't mind, thank you very much. And so let me show you how that's going to look. So within the Amplify console, a lot of the things that we've been doing have been in Studio. So that's in the backend environment, Studio, and that's where you can do things like enabling authentication, enabling your storage, changing your model, actually setting up your components. But for hosting specifically, you can go to the hosting environment section. And what you can do here is you basically, from here, are able to use, sorry, one moment. As I mentioned here, you're able to use things like connecting to your CI/CD pipeline or connecting your GitHub repo to your CI/CD pipeline. But in my case, I've actually opted to not use Git, which is not the smartest thing to do. So to make things really simple for this demo, what I can do is I can just build my app using just a simple command of yarn build. And now what's going to happen is that my app is being built right now. And since my app has been built, I can open up the build folder. And I can simply drag my build folder and then drop that into the screen. And it's not letting me. So what's happening is that because I've previously deployed an app, it's actually able to deploy relatively quickly because I already have a lot of those components already in place. So what's happening here now is not only was your app deployed, you also have a URL available for you that you can now basically use to be able to display your application in a real life, basically a production situation, for example, where you're able to show this application to your customers, to your end users, and be able to actually serve data to them. I'm sorry, I saw your hand. The URL piece? Let me show you. So you basically have this settings section in which you could use to basically customize different things about your app. You can add users, for example, specific users to be able to access your application. So if you want, for example, not to have to worry about setting up access to the AWS console and you want to give people on your team specific access to just the Amplify app, that's where you do it, through this settings page. And from here is where you can basically make your customizations to basically enable your domain. You can see here from domain management. That's basically how you're able to set things up. So we provide you with a visual experience to be able to do that as well. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Not at this point in time, no. That is something that we've discussed, but that's not something that, that has been prioritized at this point in time. All right. Yes? So I would say the main difference there is that we're providing you with the tooling ourselves, and it's streamlined as well, so you don't have to do a lot of the setup yourself. We do that for you. You also have the ability to use our Amplify CLI in order for you to be able to customize all of the different build steps yourself. So you can do that if you want, of building everything yourself. We just provide you with all of that tooling to be able to just quickly get started, quickly build everything for you without having to go through the manual process of setting up all of your GitHub actions and how things run and how the build happens and how you deploy your app. So we do that for you, basically. Could you say that one more time? I'm sorry. Yes, it does. So we built these components in a way where they're actually React components. So if you want to use them in state, if you want to pass that state over to other components, if you want to use something like Redux, for example, you have the ability to do that. I don't have specific details on that, but I can get back to you on that like right after this talk, and we can chat a little bit about it. Please. How is what? I'm sorry? Absolutely. That's actually a great question. So let me show you what happens here. When you actually... So what I had done on my end when I started my app is I went into the data section. And when I went into the data section and created my model, after you create your model, you have the ability to click on Save and Deploy. When you do Save and Deploy, that generates all of the necessary resources in the cloud to set up API for you. And once that's set up, that is basically what's used behind the scenes to connect your model and your UI component.
So I see that you have like landing functions and REST APIs. Are you able to add like on-click calling responses for UI objects in a sense, or is that something that
I'm sorry, the last part escaped me. Call.
Sure. So like you showed how when you click a component, you can route to a different URL. Say you click a component, it could do an API call, and it would run it.
Yeah.
Is that something that you can connect there, or is it something you do?
So I think the best answer for that is both. You can either do that in Amplify Studio, where you do the same thing of basically saying that on click, I want to call this URL. That's potentially something that you could do. But I imagine that the cleaner way for you to do it is probably would be for you to override that on-click handler in your code, which basically is just using that basically on-click, open curly brackets, set up what your function needs to be, and then handling your custom logic that way. That would be, in my opinion, the better way to do it. Yes?
Example you showed with the routing, do you have to hard code the domain, or
I definitely think it would be better for you to handle it with code, that's for sure. This was just for the purposes of the demo, but that's, I would definitely the smarter way of doing it.
So what are the limitations for making changes after the first generation of the application?
What is it? I'm sorry?
I mean, if you can make changes to your application after the first generation, like let's say on the Figma, on the data model, different places, how robust is that, or would it kind of break the application?
So the answer to that is it depends. If, for example, you're deleting a parameter or a part of your model that other components are using, you're going to have a problem. You need to fix that. But if you're iterating on what you already have and you're growing your model, for example, you're adding additional components to your UI, then that should not break for you. It has a little bit of, like that robustness works that way. And what will end up happening is that Amplify Studio will also inform you. So if you, for example, delete components that are needed or delete parameters like within your model or fields within your model that are needed by your ad components, then you'll get an error basically. Like you'll be able to see that. Please. Yes, so what you can do is basically through our CLI, you're able to customize all of the different steps that our CI/CD pipeline goes through. So you're able to extend that and make changes to it if you need to. Yes?
How do you restrict permissions? Like, what if someone uploads something that's not authorized, uploads a build that's not valid?
Somebody that's not authorized.
Where do I have permissions come here? Like, who's able to deploy? Who's able to modify?
So, like at this point in time, our permissions are a little bit lightweight, like on the console side. So two things that you could do. You can either create an AWS user that basically can access the console, and from that you can basically set up permissions for it. That's one piece. The second piece is you also have this concept of permissions that you can provide your users, that you're providing control to your application if you don't want them to go through the console and you want them to only be able to access Amplify. And actually, this is not it. It's always I always forget where this is. Okay, I can, here it is. Amplify Studio settings. So you can invite a user, and from here you can also, there's two types of different permissions. You can provide them with full access. They can do everything that I showed you today. Or you can provide them with very limited access where they only can, for example, make changes to your data. So those are very limited, but those are the options that we have available at this point in time. All right, we have a couple minutes left. Any last questions? What if you, I'm sorry? That's a great question. And that's where the power of components comes in. Like if you have a React application and you don't want to actually use everything that Amplify offers in terms of like you don't want your whole application to be built with Amplify, you only want components or pieces, then you can choose to do that. You'll still need to import the Amplify app or the environment into your local machine when you're building that app and when you're deploying it. The difference is going to be you're going to have bits and pieces of, for example, the previous app that you have built, and then you'll also have components that were created with Amplify that you'll then basically need to use within your app.
So in that case, you wouldn't use Amplify to deploy. You would just use whatever components you actually can deploy.
That depends. I would say it depends on the type of app. It depends on the type of app. Yes. The what again? I'm sorry? Yes. So basically what ends up happening is that we import all of the resources, and then you have Datastore that's running behind the scene, which is a component that Amplify has that connects to your backend because it has all of the configuration information now on your local machine, and then is able to grab all of that information for your UI component. And I'm actually at time. So thank you everyone so much. Really, really appreciate all the questions.